Hey Pokemon Masters, Bookkeeper Toby here, and while this video about the Pokemon timeline is filmed after the last two videos I did about the Pokemon timeline and Pokemon Multiverse, I promise you can watch them in any order because timelines aren't supposed to be this confusing. Because Pokemon has a bunch of timelines across the canons of the manga and the TV show and the trading card game, and of course the main series of games, which in itself has multiple different versions across the main series, and then remakes, and now we're getting games set back in the past like Legends Arceus. How do all of these things make a cohesive narrative? Do they? Does Pokemon even care? There have been interviews with Gamefreak staff where they've said, hey, you know what? Like, let's not worry about the timeline, just worry about the adventure. But I say no. I like thinking about timelines. And this video is probably going to be the most simple of them all, because while the other videos in this, and I do suggest you watch them all together to kind of get the full picture, while the other videos talk about like how the multiverse works in Pokemon, and then also like how the different canons work, I'm going to use this video to just sort of consolidate all of the Pokemon canons into one general timeline. Manga, TV show, games, remakes, all of it just kind of compressed into one solid series of events that are generally true across the majority of Pokemon history. I'm also going to be talking about just that, Pokemon history. Not just the order of the games, but the actual chronological events of Pokemon's history from the creation of the universe up to where the games take place. If you like this kind of topic, if you're interested in this kind of thing, hi, you're clearly a very certain kind of person, like me, and I just love obsessing over these things, so do say hello in the comments. If you think I've got anything wrong or I've missed anything important, let me know down there. Let's try and make this the ultimate guide to the Pokemon timeline, starting with the creation of the universe. And quick note, as I've been a Pokemon historian on YouTube for the last 7 years, I am going to incorporate some flavor, some elements of Pokemon theory into this, but I'll try to be clear as to sort of what's theory and what's factual. So, the Pokemon universe across all of its tellings seems to have begun as a sort of endless vortex of chaos and nothingness at the same time. Then from that, an egg appeared. My belief is that the unknown came in from another universe, an alternate dimension according to their Pokedex entries, and created this egg. The unknown acts as a sort of source code for the Pokemon universe. Anyway, this egg hatches into a sort of light, an energy known as the original one. And this energy is known across the Pokemon multiverse as Infinity Energy, Gigantamax Energy, the Z-Power Energy. All of this is the life force of all living things, Aura, you might know it as. And this energy creates the universe and matter as we know it, and leaves behind a sort of shell, a creature that represents that energy. The first Pokemon, known as Arceus. Arceus, it's important to know, is not in its true form even in this state. It is bound and restricted by that godlike ring around it that appears all throughout the Pokemon franchise to represent restraint of godlike power. However, Arceus has to do this for itself to appear in the universe. From there, it creates guardians of time and space, Dialga and Palkia. Giratina is also created as a sort of counterbalance to the universe, creating the Distortion World, a universe that lies around and below ours. At that time, and this is just my theory, the Pokemon Cosmog is created either as a result of rampant infinity energy combining with the nebulous of the universe, or perhaps guided by Arceus. Cosmog is a Pokemon made up of the gases of the universe. Ultimately, these gases condense as it evolves into Cosmoem, and then when it evolves into Solgaleo or Lunana, it lets out this energy that is able to create new realms beyond the universe, Ultraspaces, where other forms of life can begin to evolve. Of course, so much of what happens at this time is speculation. We do know that Arceus also created 3 other avatars of willpower, knowledge, and emotion. These are Azelf, Uxie, and Mesprit. They bring about a sort of agency into the universe. It's possible that this was the beginning of biological life as well, with humans existing and evolving from single-celled organisms as well as other animals that did appear in the Pokemon universe for a time. It is possible that also from these 3 came the Pokemon Mew in its plentiful amounts, and it spread out across the Pokemon world and even into space to evolve and change and shift into all forms of other Pokemon life. Pokemon are special creatures with the closest tie to Arceus. At this time, they are just known as magical creatures, and you can learn about how they evolved from one another biologically by watching my Tree of Evolution series, if you're really hardcore. Anyway, let's move on to Pokemon history. As I've just mentioned, across the millions of years of Pokemon life, certain Pokemon have evolved and developed, the oldest of which known are the Kabuto line. These are the oldest living form of Pokemon, and they still appear today looking exactly as they did in the ancient past, 300 million years ago. While most Pokemon probably evolved biologically from Pokemon like Kabutops, Aerodactyl, Omastar, and other early fossilized Pokemon that we've discovered, many of them may have just been created as a result of this kind of primal energy in the earth. It's really unknown as to whether Pokemon like Groudon or Kyogre were created by accident or as a result of Arceus' will or via biological evolution. We just don't have the data yet. Some legendary Pokemon like Diancie from Carbink came about as a result of a sort of genetic mutation, while others may have been the result of magical creation. Later on we'll learn about Raikou, Entei, and Suicune coming from other Pokemon, but I digress. Humans can date the Kabuto line back to 300 million years ago, but the first bits of recorded history actually happened around 20,000 years ago, when, in the Pokemon world, generally speaking across all of the canons, Eternatus crash-landed in the Galar region, bringing about with it Gigantamax energy. Again, theory time, it's possible this is some fallen creation hand of Arceus, or maybe it's just some dragon from out in Ultraspace. We don't know. But we do know that humans existed at this time 20,000 years ago, as 20,000 years ago was the creation of the Pokemon Claydol by people, and we actually still see in the Galar region today Claydol sentries guarding the secrets of Galar. We know that 10,000 years before the main events of Pokemon there was an ice age, but at this time human history is still largely unrecorded. It makes sense, they wouldn't have had a lot of tools to do the recording with, and unless something hugely significant like a giant dragon falling from space happened, there's probably not a lot worth recording in terms of historical events. At this point, the human race is still evolving and becoming more like the modern version that we see in the Pokemon world and in our world. For human prehistory, recording and everything really kicks off around 3,000 years ago, when in the Kalos region a war was raging. People were working side by side with Pokemon as tools of destruction. The King AZ lost his partner Floette in battle, so people and Pokemon are working together at this time, and as a result of that anger and loss, uses the ultimate weapon, designed with the power of Xerneas or Yveltal, this infinite energy, to strike down the peoples and Pokemon of other regions. Of course, this only happens in some timelines. In other timelines, 3,000 years ago is the beginning of the Darkest Day, when Eternatus once again reawoke, exuding Gigantamax energy into the Galar region, causing Gigantamax Pokemon to rampage. It was a historically significant event. Or perhaps in some canons, both of these events existed and are in fact responsible for each other. 3,000 years ago also saw the disappearance of Melmetal for the last time until modern day. It just disappeared. There's one more event that happens 3,000 years ago and actually happens every 1,000 years. A meteor shower passes by the Hoenn region. There's comets that go around the Pokemon world all the time and often drop off alien Pokemon life forms. But this meteor shower was a big one, carrying with it that primal infinite energy. Perhaps it was even hit by the ultimate weapon, causing the awakening of Groudon and Kyogre in their primal forms. Around 500 years after this point, the Relic Crown is created, looking a lot like Zamazenta's crown, interestingly enough, to sit on the head of one of the two kings of Unova, twin heroes that sat on either side of the region in the abyssal ruins and in the what is now the desert of Unova. From these castles, they ruled the region in companionship with Pokemon, but in a clash of truth and ideals, the castles were destroyed, buried underneath the region as the new modern Unova began to rise. Other buildings and relics like the Dragon Spiral Tower had been created at this point, but who knows exactly when they were made or for what purpose. It's important to note though that across the regions of the Pokemon world, technological progression is happening at different points. People and Pokemon are working together in Unova to rule kingdoms, but at Kalos they're at war, and in Hisui, people are even struggling to just get a foothold in that region because the Pokemon are known to be savage. 2,000 years ago, the meteor shower returns to Hoenn, destroying the Draconids' home and creating meteor falls. They become a sort of seafaring, traveling, nomadic group of people who spread spread out talking about the lore of the Pokemon world and dropping off different relics in every region. In fact, they spent about the next 1500 years just traveling around the world, sharing information between the world's people, bringing the entire world up to speed on what's going on. The Braille writing system was first developed, but then the unknown were discovered and a new writing system was created, and that can be seen in ruins all across the Pokemon world. Around 700 years before the main events of the Pokemon games, towers were built to worship Ho-Oh and Lugia, and around 500 years before the biggest leap happened, the first creation in Kalos of the Pokeball in the form of Mina. This was achieved as a result of mystery science, a sort of Pokemon alchemy that allowed for the creation of a device that would truly give people the ability to use Pokemon in a way like never before. This invention though, the creation of the Pokeball and how to craft them from apricorns, it would take time to perfect, and it would take time to make its way across the Pokemon world. In the Unova region, the gym leader Drayden doesn't even remember having Pokeballs as a kid. It's that recent for Unova. But in the Hisui region, Pokeball crafting landed in the hands of the Galaxy Expedition team around 300 years ago. They made their way to a land that they had heard about, the Hisui region, but they weren't the first people there. Those Draconids I mentioned earlier, and this is just a theory that it is in fact those Draconids, but certainly some people had traveled to Hisui before. In fact, around 2,000 years before the Galaxy Expedition team had got there, space and time had been threatened as people started learning about Dialga, Palkia, Giratina, and a creature that they called the Almighty Sinnoh. This would turn out, of course, to be Arceus, that shell, that remain of the original one from all the way back at the creation of the universe. Back then, a hero was called upon and the events recorded, but not recorded super well, so that future travelers would settle and become the Diamond and Pearl clans, worshipping slightly different versions of the Almighty Sinnoh. But ultimately, the Galaxy Expedition team, now with their Pokeballs, were able to settle in the Hisui region and create Jubilife Village, the first stronghold in the region. And once again, time and space were threatened, but a Dawn or Lucas from the future was sent back in time to save the day. And with that, Dawn and Lucas, in a sort of bootstrap paradox, gave the people of Hisui an idea for the very first gym challenge, a challenge that then would appear throughout the entire remaining history of the Pokemon world. It was adopted in some regions much sooner. For example, in the Galar region, Opal is said in modern day to have taken over from her mother 70 years ago, which means that the Pokemon League has literally been going on for that long in the Galar region, but like I say, in the Unova region, they didn't even have Pokeballs when Drayden was a kid. In the most recent 100 or so years though, before the main events of the Pokemon series, the towers of Ho-Oh and Lugia were destroyed, possibly as a result of war, possibly as a result of looting, we're not quite sure. But in that destruction, Pokemon were killed and then revived by Ho-Oh, creating Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. Anything after this is really considered modern day in the Pokemon history. Wow, okay, that took us a long time just to get to the main series of games. I love this part of the timeline, but I'm certainly not the only person who researches it, and so for this next bit, I've teamed up with Professor Ramnus, a sort of Pokemon timeline expert and analyst. It's his main area of expertise, who's always streaming his theories over on Twitch, which you should check out, and they are linked in the description. I teamed up with Professor Ramnus because we've talked about the Pokemon timeline a bunch, and typically we agree on exactly what the order of events are for the main series of games, and then how you deal with the remakes and prequels and that kind of thing. In fact, not only do we agree on the order, but Professor Ramnus has a special system for kind of working out the almost exact-ish dates based on real-world events that these games are taking place. Ramnus?
Hey Toby, and hey Pokemon Masters, not only do we agree, but we can even plot the Pokemon games along our real-world timeline, using the years of the release dates of some of the Pokemon games being the years in which they are set, as some real-world dates are referenced, like the Old Man in Pewter City Museum mentioning July 20th, 1969 as the date of the moon landing. If Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow are in 1996, then instantly we can map out much of the main series with their releases, and using time skips referenced in the game. There are 3 instances of a hard time skip between all of the games. There's the 3 years between Kanto and Johto, as evidenced by multiple NPCs commenting on how long it has been since the events of the Kanto games, 2 years between Black and White and its sequel, as evidenced in the same fashion as earlier, and finally 20 years between Kanto and Alola, as seen with Mimikyu's bio page on the Sun and Moon website, as well as Porygon's dex entries in Sun and Ultra Moon.
This ordering lines up with a tweet by Gamefreak staff that was quite quickly deleted, but very much not forgotten, plotting out the Pokemon games along a similar timeline to ours. Using this timeline as a base, I'd like to take Ramnus' suggestion of applying some real-world dates and apply them to Gold and Silver, Black and White, Black and White 2, and Sun and Moon. That's because all of these games have hard time skips that are directly mentioned inside of the games, so we know how long apart they are from one another. And sure enough, these dates line up with the real-world releases of these games. However, this can't work for the whole Pokemon series. The Hoenn and Sinnoh games in particular, as well as the remakes, which obviously come out after the original games were released, but are set probably on the same date. So we're gonna have to contest with some different bits of evidence for this. Luckily, we have solutions.
Based on the tweeted timeline, the Hoenn games are happening around the same time as the Kanto games, the Johto games are around the same time as the Sinnoh games, and X and Y are around the same time as Black 2 and White 2. But I don't think this is entirely accurate, and it could be part of the reason the tweet was deleted in the first place, since there are in-game clues that challenge the idea of them happening exactly at the same time as one another. In the Hoenn games, we meet the Pokefan trainer class wearing Pikachu-styled merchandise. As mentioned earlier, this was on Mimikyu's bio page on the Pokemon website. When Sun and Moon was coming out, it stated that 20 years prior, Pikachu merch was becoming more popular. This was likely as a result of Red winning the Indigo League with his Pikachu back in 1996. Furthermore, Red's shirt with the 96 logo in Sun and Moon is also likely reference to this, meaning Red, Blue, and Yellow likely happened a bit before Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, so we'll say around 1996 or 1997 on this one. With the Johto games, and we will mention the remakes soon guys, don't you worry, they are references happening slightly before the intro to Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, with the Jubilife TV program referencing the Red Gyarados at the Lake of Rage. So, if the Johto games are in 1999, then Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum are around the year 2000. Finally, X and Y were released in 2013, a year after Black 2 and White 2. There's an NPC that mentions Team Plasma making a news, quote, a while back. Now, in isolation, that line could be referring to either the Team Plasma from Black and White, or the Team Plasma from Black 2 and White 2. However, there's another reference in the form of a Bryson Man figure in the Hotel Richisime, and another that references Colress, confirming that these games take place after Black 2 and White 2 specifically, and thus X and Y taking place in 2013 sounds reasonable.
There is a slew of other evidence that ties in with this, but before we get onto the complicated subject of remakes, let's talk about Pokemon Black and White, where there's a reformed Team Rocket grunt, the one who stole the power plant parts in Gold and Silver. He is now settled with a child who looks to be a school child trainer class in Unova. As well as that, there is actually a character that we see age up between these games. I'm talking, of course, about Caitlyn from the Unova Elite Four that was previously in the Platinum Battle Frontier as a very similar character, but clearly with an age difference. And for this one, we're good because there's an interview with Ken Sugimori, who's the art designer and director for Pokemon and all of these characters in general, who said that Caitlyn was designed to be around 14 years old in the time of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. He mentions Heart Gold, Soul Silver specifically, which lines up really well with Ramnus's timeline here, and that would mean that she's 14 in 1999 around Heart Gold, Soul Silver, 15 in the Platinum games in the year 2000, and then you're talking about an 11-year skip, making her 26 in Black and White and 28 in Black and White 2, respectively. But okay, let's talk about the first three remakes to begin with: Fire Red, Leaf Green, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. The first two are pretty simple to deal with, but the third, not so much. Fire Red and Leaf Green and Heart Gold and Soul Silver seem to take place identically to where their original games would have gone. There's nothing in the games to suggest otherwise, so Fire Red and Leaf Green is happening in 1996, with Heart Gold and Soul Silver happening in 1999. Similarly, by the way, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this timeline is supposed to be a telling of the entire history of the Pokemon world, so you can apply this to other mediums like the manga and the anime as well. In 1996, whether it's Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, Fire Red, Leaf Green, Pokemon Origins, the main anime, I Choose You the movie, the manga, there is a character called Red or Ash who's leaving Pallet Town and going about their journeys, and then in 1999, Team Rocket are taking over the Johto region, or trying to at least. I just wanted to hone in on that point because I know we've been talking a lot about the games specifically, but this does apply to most of the other mediums of the Pokemon world. But I digress. Let's talk about Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, because this is where things get slightly more complicated. Because unlike the Gen 1 and 2 remakes that seem to be happening at the exact same time as the original games, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire directly seems to have some contradictory evidence, mentioning the gym leader Valerie, who shouldn't exist until the age of Pokemon X and Y. Surely that would mean that the events of Hoenn in the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire timeline are happening somewhere around the Kalos games, or maybe there's a way to reconcile this evidence.
Oh yeah, that's understandable. However, there are specific clues within Oros that help keep them in line with the previous Hoenn games. During the main story, you get a couple of call forwards to the events of Unova, with a Devon researcher talking about Dr. Fennel's GameSync, which is still in development at this point in time, and a scale model of the Royal Unova in the Oceanic Museum, which is stated on the plaque to still be under construction. This places Oros before the Unova games for sure, but what seals the deal here is something that happens at the end of the Delta episode. Steven talks with Wallace about venturing outside of Hoenn and giving the position of champion over to him. This is interesting, because the only time we see Steven outside of Hoenn, barring appearances in battle facilities, is at Silphco during the post-game of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. That helps confirm that Oros, just like with the previous Hoenn games, take place before the Johto games in 1996.
Okay, but you know what I'm gonna ask, right? What about Wally and the girl who mentions Valerie? Surely this proves it.
Ah, Valerie is an interesting case. For you see, she may look young, but it's likely that she's older than she looks. She is, after all, a fairy type specialist, and I mean, just look at her eyes. They're quite unsettling, much like how certain fey creatures have an uncanny or unsettling aura about them. Not only that, but the Fairy Tail Girl trainer class also shares this trait with Valerie, with one Fairy Tail Girl in particular revealing that she's actually an adult that's kept looking like a young girl due to the power of fairies.
So now we've come to the penultimate stage, the Alola games. Not the latest, but pretty close to the latest. And there's a couple things we've got to talk about here. The main one being a bit of confusion about the character Wally, who shows up in the battle tree at the end of the game, no further aged up from where he was in Oras, but at the same time, Red and Blue are here aged up from where they were in Red and Blue. Let's just first talk about where exactly Alola goes on the timeline, and then we'll deal with these problems. Ramnus, if you would.
Alright, so we already brought up Mimikyu and Porygon as evidence, but now we could talk about the human characters that help us solidify Alola's placement. First off, we have the dynamic duo of Kalos, Sina and Dexio. During the Kalos games, the two are given overworld sprites that are visually similar to the Ace trainers of the Kalos region. Ace trainers typically have designs that make them look like they're supposed to be in their mid to late teens, like around 16 or 17 years old. Then in the Alola games, despite the more realistic body proportions compared to X and Y's character designs, you get the sense that Sina and Dexio are perhaps young adults at this point, and with a 3-year time gap between Kalos and Alola games, that'd make them around possibly 19 or 20 years old. Finally, we have yet another Unova Elite Four member coming in clutch for us, and that's the dapper gambler himself, Grimsley. Grimsley appears in Alola and calls himself, quote, a former member of the Unova region's own Elite Four, which tells us that these games take place after Black 2 and White 2, which is when he's still part of said Elite Four.
Hold on, but there's a bit of evidence here. What about the Sun and Moon art book that shows Grimsley and it says 2 years later? What do you make of that?
You're right, that's a good point. Naturally, one's first instinct is to assume, oh, it's just 2 years after the Unova games. However, it's very vague because we don't know for sure if that's what it's referring to. What we do know is that there is a 4-year time gap between Black 2 and White 2 and the Alola games. Again, considering that he's still in the Elite Four at the end of Black 2 and White 2, I don't think it makes much sense that it's 2 years after those games. It would make a little more sense if the statement was referring to it being 2 years since he lost his position as an Elite Four member, especially considering that he specifically brought that up in dialogue.
Okay, we're finally here. We have to talk about the big contradiction that is Wally. Wally in the battle tree. How can Wally be here, looking as young as he did in the Hoenn games? How are we going to deal with this? Can you explain it?
Well, with a little thing called ludonarrative dissonance. Ludonarrative is the portion of the story of a game that's told through its gameplay. The dissonance comes from when there's a logical inconsistency between what is conveyed through gameplay and what is conveyed through the story, or when gameplay is presenting one message while the story presents another. Wally's appearance definitely falls under ludonarrative dissonance, but my favorite example to use is the Pokemon World Tournament. In the PWT, you have all the gym leaders and champions from Gens 1 through 4 making an appearance, but a handful of characters that show up look exactly the same as when they did when we last saw them at the time. Characters like Red, Blue, Janine, Bugsy, Whitney, Tate, and Liza, all of whom are portrayed as fairly young, and yet despite 13 years passing between Johto and Black 2 and White 2, none of them look like they've aged a single day. But the worst offender here has to be Giovanni. He's supposed to be a well-known criminal that's wanted by the international police. What are you doing here, man? You're smarter than this! Anyways, this can help explain most of these instances of characters appearing when it doesn't make sense for them to appear in.
You know, that is a good explanation and makes sense, but it wouldn't make sense for Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which features the character of Mina looking younger than she did in her appearance in Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. In previous videos about the timeline, Mina has always been kind of the timeline destroyer, so Ramnus, what about Mina?
Well, I say that's a great question. It was already established that trial captains retire at the age of 20, so the fact that Mina is a trial captain means she would be 19 years old at the latest possible point before her 20th birthday, and as we have established here, the Alola games take place 20 years after the Kanto games. Logically, this would mean that Mina would have just been born at the latest, or hasn't been born yet at the earliest. And unlike the situation with Wally, we can't just brush away this as non-canon, as she does interact with you during the main story to a small degree. I think what we have here is a separate alternate universe, one in which Mina was born earlier than she was in previous games, and also one where Red, Blue, and Green all went on their Pokemon journey earlier than what we originally experienced in previous games. To put it simply, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee still take place in the Pokemon World's version of 1996, since the only real differences that we can take note of are that a few people do things earlier than before, while everything else remains the same, like Porygon still being created, quote, recently, Team Rocket's schemes, the captain of the SSN getting sick, and so on.
Huge thank you to Professor Ramnus for joining me for this one. A link to his Twitch stream is in the description, and he's going through and taking part in something he's calling Project Herodotus. This is where he's going through and streaming every single Pokemon game to compile a sort of Hyrule Historia of the Pokemon world. So click the link and join him on his research journey.
Let's do it. Pokemon timeline. Here we go. You've had all of the history. You've had all the prehistory. Now we've got the exact years of the games. In around the mid-1800s is where Pokemon Legends Arceus takes place, followed by, in around 1996, the Kanto story, and I'm going to use the region name here to just kind of simplify it. The Hoenn story takes place in around 1996 to 1997, with, in 1999, the Johto story, and then at the turn of the millennium, the Sinnoh story happening in about 2000. Then, a decade later, and timing with the game's release, we have the Unova story, followed by, in 2012, the Unova 2 story with Black and White and Black and White 2. The Kalos story is happening around 2013 and the Alola story around 2016. So we're more or less up to date and onto the current generation with Pokemon Sword and Shield. Based on all of these previous releases, there isn't anything to indicate that it didn't happen in around 2019 or the Pokemon World's equivalent. It is interesting to know, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, that the Pokemon League started much sooner in the Galar region, with, according to her trainer card, Opal taking over from the gym 70 years ago, and even Mustard from 50 years ago having Pokeballs, modern day Pokeballs, appearing on his shorts. We also know that there has been some time since Sun and Moon, probably a couple years, because Macrocosmos has access to the Beast Ball and even to Type Null, which means all of that development and work from the Alola games has happened. And then finally, we're looking out into the future. However, before we get on to Scarlet and Violet, there is actually one other mainline Pokemon game we haven't mentioned: Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. And I know what you're thinking, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, come on, they happen at the same time as Diamond and Pearl, why do we even need to clarify? But there is one difference to the story of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which I think is really interesting and is maybe a bit more of a multiverse theory, but I'm not going to make a whole video on it, so I want to mention it here. It is interesting to note that in the post-game of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, as long as you have complete save data of Legends Arceus on your console, Arceus can be found. The Azure Flute can be given to you so that you can catch Arceus at the end of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. This is significant because if you're thinking about it in terms of Pokemon timelines, it is only possible to catch Arceus and BDSP in a reality in which the past was saved with Arceus in Legends Arceus. I'm wondering if that in itself is a sort of time loop, a literal god in the machine. The player character Dawn and Lucas in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl catch Arceus at the end of their adventure because the Azure Flute appears in their room. As a result, Arceus will send them back in time to the time of Legends Arceus, in which Dawn and Lucas will help Arceus save the future, which allows for the Azure Flute to end up in their room, which means that they can go and re-meet Arceus at the end of Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, who will send them back in time. It's a little bootstrap paradox, I just thought it'd be interesting to mention. But yeah, Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl happening at the same time, if not necessarily in the same universe, as Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. And then finally, we look forward to the future that now exists as a result of us saving the world with Arceus by our side. And that is the future of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet version. As it stands, there is currently no reason to think that Scarlet and Violet won't take place in the Pokemon World's equivalent of 2022. However, I will be on the lookout for any things that are interesting, any traits, any references. Something I thought was interesting from Sword and Shield is that there's not really any mentions to other characters, only other regions from previous Pokemon games. So that did suggest that maybe it could be set further in the future, especially as a result of the Pokeballs on the shorts of of Mustard. But I think as a result of Legends Arceus, we now know that Pokeball technology just developed at different times depending on the region of the Pokemon world, with Galar region just being much older. And that makes sense because its recorded history goes back the furthest to 20,000 years ago with Eternatus. Most other regions only go back as far as 3,000, so clearly technology progresses at different rates in these regions. I love looking at timelines, and I think this is probably the closest thing we have to a definitive Pokemon timeline, if such a thing even really exists. But I want to know your thoughts, and if you've watched this far, and I am assuming this is a long video, I don't know the exact time code, you do, leave a comment with what the time code is so that I can say to you, hi, Thank you for watching this far, you absolute boss. I'm glad you like Pokemon Timeline and Theory videos. There's much more to come on the horizon with Scarlet and Violet. Thanks for watching, and of course, soar high, Pokemon Masters.
This is Ash Ketchum. You just watched a video by Birdkeeper Toby. That makes you a Pokemon Master!
As always, a massive thank you to those of you who support this channel on Patreon. You make this channel possible, and a special thank you to the big patrons of this month, the Elgator, Jed Rubin, and Michael Hornshoe. Thank you.